My name is John Desouza. I was a special agent in the FBI for over 20 years. At the age of 23, I became one of the youngest people ever recruited into the FBI as a special agent. As an agent, I helped solve high-profile crimes against humanity. Homicides, the '93 World Trade Center attacks, the Oklahoma City bombing, even 9/11. Most of my cases were criminal in nature, but other cases weren't so cut and dry. If I were to tell you I saw or experienced nothing strange during my 20-plus years of service, I wouldn't be telling the truth. These cases couldn't be explained in the physical world.
You see that?
This appeared in the Norwegian sky.
Oh my God, get that.
What is this?
Major sighting here.
What I saw, the things I couldn't explain, they haunted me throughout my career. After 9/11, all these cases started coming forward. Children drawing pictures of burning buildings before it happened. Others saying they made predictions of 9/11. They were called indigo children.
There is absolutely no doubt that this is a different kind of child. It's a different kind of human being. They think differently. They are completely different.
I investigated several indigo children while in the FBI. Could they predict the future? Terror events?
There were a lot of people that had premonitions of the tragedy of 9/11, days, even weeks before the event actually happened. The problem is, what do you do with it?
The FBI concluded the indigo children's premonitions were just coincidence, so they closed the case. I believe evil exists in the physical world, but from my experience, there's an evil even darker in the paranormal.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with John Desouza. John, thank you very much for having the time to talk to us, and it's really a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you, Fabio. It's great to be here with you on independent spirituality and to just spend a little time with you and your audience. And I'm really looking forward to this. It's something that's really been on my mind, and it's just really glad to talk with your audience and with your people here. It's very important stuff, and very important stuff that we need to discuss and talk about.
Definitely. And we have a mutual friend. It's Laura Zenhauer. She was with us last May on a conference in Brazil, and we talk about you and how we have actually to tell the world that your experience and all the things that you know and all the things that you've been through. And we talk a lot about integrating the different experiences from people from the US and Brazil and Europe and Asia, because sometimes we talk so locally, and when we go to the conferences in the US are usually people from the US, and when we go to Brazil it's always people from Brazil. We need to do that exchange more often, right?
Yes. We need that cultural exchange between countries, because I'll tell you truthfully, the nation's governments themselves are pretty unified on what they have to do to keep this sort of information away from us, away from you, Fabio, and away from me.
Yes.
And so, they're pretty much unified across cultural lines in what they need to do. So why shouldn't we be? Why shouldn't we, as different national populations, why shouldn't we also reach across cultural lines and be unified in our need to get this information from the governments, to get this, or from wherever we need to get it from? And so that's really what we're facing. We're facing nations that basically march to the same tune, basically, because they're ordered to. And I'm sorry to tell people, nations, what they do is they follow orders. They really do. They may give you this theater sometimes that they're against each other, and that we're against the United States and we're against, and they are in certain respects, they are, and they do have to play that role to a certain extent. But on these issues, on these exopolitical issues, these paranormal issues, these extraterrestrial issues, they tend to be unified. And it's because they're listening to the same authorities that are telling them how they have to deal with these issues. And that's where we are.
Yeah, you're completely correct. And that divide and conquer strategy, unfortunately, it's working, and we have to fight because we are not united. We are not united inside our countries, and we are less united across countries. So we need to start doing something.
Exactly. And we need to be talking and sharing these common experiences and how we are going to be moving forward to try to uncover and to share all of these information and all these things, different things that have happened. And the best way I think to do that is to do what Laura Eisenhower was able to do with you guys there in Brazil, and which is to tell stories, to share experiences, and to share a way forward that we can go from here on out.
Perfect. And the thing that I found interesting about Brazil and Latin America in specific is that we are so spiritual. We're so open to these new possibilities, to those new ideas, and we have so many stories. I shared with you this week about our Varginha case that we talk in Minas Gerais, and Brazilians call it, it's like our Roswell.
Right.
It's not pretty much the same, but
Yes.
it was a very interesting case that we have, and we have so many, and we are so open to the unknown. To as I said, we are a very religious and spiritual. That's not always connect, but country and region as Latin America. And as I see, I'm not sure how you see those cultural differences, but I see that living in North America, living in Toronto, I can see that North Americans, especially, of course, Mexico is included in North America, but I'm talking about US and Canada. It's more of a logical approach. It's more of a UFO research approach.
Yes.
And we in Latin America is more of a spiritual and ascended
Exactly.
masters. And what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. My raíces are in Ecuador, South America. My parents and also Brazil, Portuguese, Brazil and Portugal as well. And on my father's side, and on my mother's side is Ecuador, South America. And so I'm familiar with that whole aspect. It tends to be, unfortunately, in the West, it's been hijacked by scientism. It's been scientism, meaning science as not as a method, but as a worldview, as kind of like a religion, sort of. And that has really closed off our ability to see what reality really is in our part of the world. I remember I have a presentation that I do on these little creatures that are reported on a regular basis throughout South America, Central America, Mexico, and the Latin American countries, and sometimes we call them duendes. And there's people, because we have our cell phones, people are taking videos of these things. They're taking videos, and they show the videos, and they're available out there. But people in the West are trained that when they see that sort of thing, they just are supposed to say, "Oh, that's not real. That couldn't be real. Couldn't possibly be real." And so that's what they do. They act with their training, what they've been taught. And they've been taught that the world is just what the television tells them that it is. And that's the biggest lie that we're living in right now. And so that's one of the great differences I see in South America, in the Latin American countries, that you have a deeper connection to spiritual realities that can be seen. And that's the same connection that we see in the Varginha, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, the Varginha incident in 1996 in Brazil, where we see the Silva sisters, these teenage girls, they know what they saw. And that's a great saying I like very much. I know what I saw.
Yeah.
Because they know what they saw. They saw a creature that had the large head, the small, thin body. It had feet that were V-shaped feet. And this creature seemed to be out of it, seemed to be out on its last legs. And they're going to be told later by the authorities that what they saw was a homeless man. You know, those children as teenagers, because they were telling the truth.
Yep.
They hadn't been trained yet that only what the television tells you is real. So they were telling the truth of what they saw. And even them at that time, there's no way they could have been convinced by the authorities telling them they had seen a homeless man, especially when just a little while later there was a creature that appeared alien in appearance that collapsed and was taken by the military.
Yep.
And we all know these little pieces of the Varginha to be true, and yet the authorities are still going to deny that really happened. And the problem is, you have this worldwide media, corporate media, that is uniformly enforcing a version of reality that is absolutely not real. It's absolutely not real. And yet they will enforce it throughout the world because they have the television, they have the corporate media, and they have universal deception, basically, as their rule that they're enforcing all over the world, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I see that I see religion as a tool of control. Especially, I say Brazil is the biggest Catholic country in the world. And I said to you a couple of minutes ago that Latin America is a very religious region. So do you see science as a control tool as well?
Yes, science is right now has become the greatest religion for control of the people. That's how I see it. Western rationalism has become the greatest instrument for control, complete control of the Western world. It has been, especially in the last 100 years, and this is something that has been an increasing thing for me. Notice that science, Western science especially, has been used not to help anyone, not to help us really, but to stop the seeking of knowledge, to stop us reaching out to find out what's really going on. I was in the last documentary that we did for Orchard, the Above Majestic. And Above Majestic, I did a whole section of, how is it that nobody is noticing that essentially technology and science has basically been, and I'm talking at the low level of society, at the level of the pedestrian level of society, science has basically been frozen. Our technology has basically been frozen for the last 100 years, since the year 1908, when gasoline-powered cars were invented and a lot of the fossil fuel engines were invented in widespread use. And since then, and we had, electricity, the light bulb and things like that invented, and everything was, and basically cancer and heart disease were the number 1 killer of people around the world. All of these things that affect the main level of society, the regular people, have not changed one iota in the last 100 years. Yeah. And nobody's noticing this. This is incredible. and yet people talk about all these scientific advancements. Our televisions have gotten wider, our MP3 players have gotten smaller, but basically cancer has been unabated, has not been changed one bit. Heart disease has not been changed one bit. The major things that are that are killing us and holding us down. Energy is basically still the same. When we had free energy around 1920 that was made available by Tesla, and yet we're still paying for electricity, extraordinary rates for electricity, and energy is still incredibly high priced. And the fossil fuel engine of society is still going strong. That's not possible. It's just, people don't understand. If you investigate this as an investigator, you'll see that this is not possible under natural circumstances. It's just not. It's not possible that cancer is still killing us at the same rates after 100 years of the American Cancer Society and all of these things being done supposedly to stop it. It's not possible that we're still paying for electricity. We're still driving cars around with gasoline and ethanol and things like that. It's not possible under natural conditions. It's just not. So that's what starts. If you really start to realize that, it starts to wake you up that there are forces that are working against us, that appear to be altruistic. They appear like they're working in our favor, but they are not. They're absolutely not. And so that really starts to become the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of understanding that we need to change the situation ourselves, because otherwise it's just never going to change. Governments are not going to change because they just follow orders. That's all they do.
Perfect. And that's exactly where I wanted to go. I have a bunch of questions here, and I haven't asked one yet. I swear to you, we've been chatting, and I haven't asked one from my questions here. But there's this one that it's you just talk about it, and I receive a lot of emails and a lot of commentaries from the people from the channel, from people from my courses and lectures. They are always saying that, oh, okay, you talk about ETs, you talk about secret government and those conspiracy theories, as they call. So show me the proof. People keep saying to me, show me the proof. And right. my standard response to them is that you have to go after it. Right. No one's going to put that on television. And sometimes they do. Sometimes they put that on television and newspapers, but we don't pay attention, or we criticize that, or we make jokes about that. So my question to you is that, where for someone that is just starting, it's seeing you for the first time, hearing you for the first time, and say, hey, I want to know if it's true. I want to go after it. What's the first step? How can we go after real proof?
Well, the first step is for them to realize that they have no idea what real proof and real evidence really are, because their entire understanding of what it is has been completely corrupted by television. Television has taught people, the average person, that proof means something that you can get into a test tube. You can give it to a bunch of scientists or men in lab coats, and they take it to a laboratory, and then they do DNA testing, and then they'll show, oh, you know what? This is from an alien, and now we have proof. It's in a tube, and the scientists have said, yes, this is a residue from an alien, and now we know, and we can show that this is the proof. Well, people don't understand. You can't prove something. Like the people who say, oh, we should have a sample of Bigfoot. We should have a sample of Bigfoot that we could just prove it. People don't understand. If you don't have DNA already collected from a certain class of species in order to have a database to compare it against, then any DNA material that you get is absolutely worthless. It doesn't show you anything, and it can't really show you much of anything, because you have no basis for comparison. So these are basic things that scientists and researchers don't know. Only investigators know this stuff. Professional investigators, they know. And also, professional investigators know that getting evidence for something is not the same as proving it. And that evidence of something means anything. It can be anything that shows a proposition is more or less likely to be true. And what it is goes only to the weight that you give that evidence. So for instance, if some homeless guy says to you, I just saw a UFO. I saw a UFO. It was right there in the sky, and it was, and I know it was there, and I absolutely know. His statement is actually evidence. That's actually evidence. Now, how much weight you give it, though, is up to you, because you might say, okay, well, that's just some homeless guy. He's making a statement, and so I don't give his statement very much weight. So then that's evidence that is not very, very good, very high, that has very much value. So then you discard it. That's fine. But it is evidence, though. It is. And that's one of the things that people don't understand. Even the most minuscule, even something spiritual, can be evidence. That can be evidence. The question is, how much weight do you give it as a person in a subjective standard? That's the real question that goes on there. Now, the other point of that is that people don't understand. People want, especially scientists and researchers, they want something to be proven. They want, give me proof, because I want it to be proven. That means it's 100% proven as true and accurate. Well, you can't get absolute proof of something, even if you have a physical thing in front of you to show what it is. Getting 100% proof that that thing is what it is, that's almost impossible to do in almost all cases. So saying something's absolutely proven, it's very, very difficult to do. All we can do is provide evidence towards showing that it's true, that something did happen. And then once you get so much evidence, because real investigators, what they do is that they connect evidence from different incidences, and they see the common patterns. And this is the answer to the person who says, hey, show me proof of this stuff. Well, before I can show you proof, you have to become a real investigator. You have to, at least, you have to employ some of their methods in order to be able to articulate and to deal in this kind of evidence and proof. Look, a real investigator takes the incidents that we see at Varginha, what happened in Varginha in 1996. They take that, all the circumstances and facts that surrounded that, and then they cross-reference it with what happened to Betty and Barney Hill in Massachusetts, the United States, in 1961. And then we take that and we take what happened to Travis Walton in 1975 in Sitgraves, Arizona, and we take that incident, and then we cross-reference, and we put all these incidences one on top of the other. We compare cases, compare patterns and clues, even across decades, even across centuries. Because Alexander, when he was coming out of Macedonia and taking over cities, Alexander had all of these, he had one particular city he had to overthrow, and he had these shining shields were recorded by his scribes that came out of the sky, and at first were fighting against his troops, and then they got a memo or something, and they switched over to fighting against the city. They knocked down the walls of the city that he was attacking. And Alexander said, I don't know what those shining shields were or what they were doing, but they flew and they started fighting against my troops at first, but then they went against the city and they knocked down the walls for us. And so we invaded, and Alexander was happy with the situation. So he didn't question it anymore, but he did record it. And that was how many thousands of years ago. And yet, real investigators have to get those clues too and see what are the commonalities. What are the commonalities? Commonalities are the shape and appearance of these UFOs, of these supposed UFOs, these things. Well, they are UFOs because they're unidentified. Sure. And what else? The descriptions of these creatures, these grayish sort of creatures with these oversized heads, these black wraparound eyes, with these V-shaped feet, all these commonalities, all these clues that span across centuries, span across decades, and span all over the globe, by the way, as well. And so if you don't have real investigators, or at least somebody who can imitate real investigators and use their methods. I was an FBI agent. FBI has been around since that same year, 1908. It's an organization that's been around for 120 years, using a lot of these methods, these investigative methods that I have used. And they're very simple and they're easy for anyone to use, but only those methods can get you to the truth of doing an investigation to collect and connect these clues, these patterns, these commonalities across all of these cases, so that you can start to get what we call the investigative conclusion. Investigative conclusion is the number one tool of investigators. It is so after you collect all the clues, connect the patterns, build the profile of your perpetrator. Who is the perpetrator in this case? Supposedly it is the alien visitors. So we're building that profile. We're putting it together, the characteristics. And so these are things that only investigators do. Scientists can't do it. Researchers can't do it, because if you're just sitting out there collecting information, analysts can't do it. All those people who support the Western scientific structure in the West, they are not investigators. They are fact gatherers. They're analysts. They collect data. That's what they do. And then they show you the data. That's all they can do. And that's a lot of work. Yeah, it is, and it's important work, but it's not investigation. Investigation, real investigators have to collect all that data, whatever it is, but then they connect clues, they connect patterns, they connect the profile characteristics of these creatures, of these situations. And then they come up with the investigative conclusion. The investigative conclusion is the final investigation of an investigator that tells you, yes, this is real. And according to the evidence, this is real, or this is not real. According to the evidence, there's not enough there to support it. That's what has to be done in order to show proof to the person who's writing you that question.
Amazing. And my perception, as I hear those types of questions, is that I hear it and I just think programming, right? Exactly. You're programming to doubt. You're programming to challenge, right? Because when we take an aspirin, we're not challenging the effects of that aspirin, right? This is not 100%. The medicines that we take every day, it's not 100%. It's probably 40, 50, if that much. And we believe that this is going to cure something, and it's just partially faith. It's not 100% science, and we believe in that as 100% true, right? And there are so many evidences. There's so much data out there. And another thing that I say is that we just need one case to be true. If thousands of cases, if not more than thousands of UFOs and paranormal cases, we just need one to be real, and we have proof of extraterrestrial beings, for instance. We just need one, right?
Well, I mean, I still believe, I still see tremendous evidence for the Villas Lobos case. Speaking of Brazil, the young man who was, I think he was like 20, and I don't remember the year this happened. I think it was like maybe it was like 1957 or something like that. But Villas Lobos was the young man who was doing peasant work in a field. I mean, he was just gathering crops when a ship appeared to him. A ship appeared to him out of nowhere, and when he was invited to come on the ship, or he was just taken onto the ship, and he was presented with a hybrid female who appeared to be maybe partly human, partly not. And then he was encouraged to have sex with her. He did so, and he did so a couple of times. And then she pointed to her belly and pointed to the stars, and then told him that he had done his purpose, whatever it was there. And then he was redelivered back. And that was a young man who didn't come away with any physical proof of what had happened to him. But he went on to become a great attorney in Brazil, a very well-respected attorney, and he was urged throughout his entire life to recant the story of what happened to him and to say that it wasn't true, especially if he wanted to continue being an important attorney. And he refused. He refused until the day that he died. He kept on advocating the truth of everything that happened to him, and that it was a true story and that everything did happen. And one of the things I try to tell people is that the greatest evidence that you can have for something, that something actually happened, is not a bloody knife or a gun, a smoking gun. It is the authenticity of a human being who you consider and who you know to be absolutely authentic, like Villas-Lobos, because that is something that is dispositive of a case. A person with absolute integrity and authenticity is absolutely resolute in the truth of what they're saying to you. Then I'd say that's very strong evidence for the truth of the matter that's being considered. Very similar with Travis Walton, who had his incident in 1975 in Sitgraves, Arizona, and who has been given many polygraph examinations, and many witnesses and people who have even been paid to say that he's lying, and yet he has always maintained the truth of every iota. And his witnesses also. He had many witnesses as well as to what happened to him when he was taken aboard a ship and he was gone. So that, like I said, human authenticity is the strongest evidence you can have in a case for the truth of something being real.
Yeah, and for people who like those kind of proofs, we have a lot of official government documents, right? We have, talking about the FBI, we have the FBI vault in the internet,
Yes.
right? That we can research.
Yes, and I always tell people to go to vault.fbi.gov and go there and go to the big button that says unexplained phenomena. Smash that button, and then go to all the subjects underneath that say UFOs. It says Jimmy Hoffa investigation. When he disappeared, it has a extrasensory perception investigation, and animal mutilation investigations as well. And so you can actually go there and see these documents. These are from like the last 100 years. Now, documents have been declassified and that are available for anybody to go look at. You can download these documents for free. I always tell people, go to the first UFO documents, first group, and go to group 1 of UFO documents and go to page 22, and they can see what I call the smoking gun, the one-page report from an FBI agent who had an informant that he says was a supernormal individual. And that's just old-fashioned language for supernatural. And he says his informant told him everything about the alien visitors. And he goes through and he says all the different conclusions. And one of the conclusions that he said is that they're not physical. They are not physical. And the UFOs are not purely physical either. And then he says they are vibrating, they're changing their vibrations, and they're coming here. They're not coming here through space, from planet to planet. They're coming here through dimensions, extra-dimensional travel. And they are changing their vibrations to match our physical vibration. That's how they appear here. Because all of this is not a question of interstellar travel. This is all a question of gateways and wormholes, portals and wormholes. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah, and that's a crucial thing to say, because usually people also say that it's impossible for them to travel that many light years from another galaxy or something. So the people, they're not traveling the way we think they are, right?
Exactly.
We have to think about portals and wormholes, as you said, and that's something even more difficult for people to understand, right? Because that's not discussed on newspapers or media or on family gathering.
Yeah, and it never will be. It never will be, because I go through this in my book, The Extra Dimensionals. I tell people, well, if aliens were to land in your backyard and with a real ship, and let's say they're real aliens, who's going to report it? Who's going to report it? Who's going to? Do you think CNN is going to show up or answer your call or talk to you?
Yeah.
Who do you think is going to come and tell you? And I actually go through a narration where I go through step by step exactly what would happen. And I tell people, first of all, you would have to film it yourself on your phone. And you would show it all, you'd film it, all of it, everything that happens. And then you would upload it to some database, to YouTube or something. And by the next morning, what you would find is that people would start hearing about your video, and they would hear, Fabio's backyard aliens. And you'd have probably millions of people going to look at Fabio's backyard aliens. And they'll all be rushing to go look. And what they would find is that your video that you uploaded has been taken down. And it has been replaced by another video where you see guys in alien rubber suits that are walking around somebody's backyard, and there's somebody there that looks just like Fabio, talking to them, looks exactly like him. And some of the effects are very real, high end, but some of them are made to look fake. And you would be thinking, where did this video come from? How did they replace it so fast? Where's my video? Why did they take it down? And the reason I tell people that would happen is because it's happened before. And it happens again and again and again. We have agents, we have people who are out there who are, their entire job is to find real incidences of paranormal that are loaded in common databases, and to take them down and replace them with something else, because they don't want millions of people coming forward and finding out that this stuff is actually real. They don't want that. They can't afford that. The global powers, what I call the elite powers in control, cannot afford that. They don't want that. And that's why they have people that are in charge of stopping that awakening from happening. And it happens all the time. And we saw it especially in 2011, in January 2011, when we had the Dome of the Rock UFO that in Israel that came out of the sky. Yeah. And landed right over the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem at about 1 in the morning when it was nighttime. And I knew people who were on the scene, and they were all like, this is it. The aliens have arrived. This is it. This is amazing. By tomorrow morning, because I think it was a Friday, by tomorrow morning, everyone is going to know, and the aliens will be talking to us and all this. And I had a much wiser man who came to me and told me, no one's going to know. He said he told me by tomorrow morning, all of these videos are going to be taken down, and they're going to be replaced with fakes. And sure enough, in the following days and the following weeks, people were all going like crazy to go see. And the New York Times and the usual suspects also went to see what happened. Where were these videos? And these videos are back up there, by the way. The real ones are back up, and they're available because it's viral. It's viral. But the elite powers in control don't care, because they just wanted to stop when it happened, they wanted to stop those millions and millions of people from seeing the real videos and becoming awakened, basically. And they did that. They were able to take down all the videos, and there's a lot of them, because a lot of tourists in that night in Jerusalem filmed the same incident happening. They all got it. They all got it on camera. Even local people there in Jerusalem were up that night, and they got film of it. But those videos were all gone the next day and the next weeks, in the following weeks that occurred. They were all taken down, and they were replaced with a video of a big red glowing ball coming out of the sky, and it looked like CGI. It looked terrible. It looked very fake.
Okay.
And so people, all these millions of people, rushed in to go see Dome of the Rock UFO, Dome of the Rock UFO, because everybody knew the title. And so they all went to see it, and they were confronted with this bad fake. And so the New York Times and CNN and everybody else reported, and Huffington Post, they all reported, oh, this was such a bad fake. This was terrible. This had nothing to do with anything. And there's other videos out there. They're all fake. They're no good. And that's it. They took care of it in 2011. In January of 2011, they took care of it. And but of course, the real videos are back up now. But it doesn't matter, because you're not going to get the millions and millions when it actually occurred.
It's the momentum, right? It lost the timing.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think I saw the real one. I think I saw the real one because it was a very impressive video. So this ship, it comes down. It's bright. Yeah. And it flashes, and then it goes up real quick.
Exactly. And that's what happened. And there's lots, and all the real videos are back up there now, because people had them. People had them on their computers and on their cameras. So all the videos are up there, but who's going to go look at it? You know, who's really gonna look into it as well? Because we don't have a media. There is no investigative media anymore. So there's nobody who's going to go and do a story or something that's showing what the people in Jerusalem really went through that night.
Yeah. It's true. Even the real videos, we don't believe. Well, I really like to talk to you about your books. So you wrote 3 books. I read one of them. You mentioned the Extra Dimensions. It is the one that I read, and it's a really good book. It was amazing to see how your input on different cases, right? You talk about Roswell, you talk about some other cases that you mentioned. So it's really nice, and it's short chapters. So you have a really how can I say that, a really quick but effective input on those cases, and you can see, you show both sides of the story. It's really nice. So the first one, you correct me if I don't get it right. It's the para-investigators, right?
Yes, para-investigators.
So what is it about? It's people with supernatural abilities?
Yeah, para-investigators is basically, it's the stories, the true stories of investigators who have supernatural abilities that they use to save people's lives, to help them to basically save people's lives. That's what they do.
So the investigators, not the people they're investigating, they have the super abilities.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes people they're investigating have abilities as well. Okay. And that could be kind of scary as well. There are serial killers who just they have some kind of connection to the beyond for some reason. And I have a serial killer who was named Willie in my book, The Para-Investigators, who explains to me why people become serial killers, and it has to do with a spiritual reality, where they learn that when they kill people, if they have an intention, they can collect a spiritual tax from their victims. Okay. And it's something very overwhelming and rewarding for them, and it's something that they get very good at, and that's why they become addicted to being serial killers. And that was something that Willie was trying to help me out with. And he told me he could identify all the serial killers all over the world, and he wanted to help me track them down. and bring them to justice, because he said if we could get them all, they can all be killed. He says because they're not really human. He said they really aren't human. And therefore you can execute them without giving them any rights, because he said he could prove in DNA that people who are serial killers, their DNA changes from human and they become something else. It was a wild theory. And then he told me this is his master plan for capturing all the serial killers all around the United States, bringing them to justice. He said if he could have them all executed, he would collect the spiritual tax when each one of them is executed. And that was his ultimate goal. It was really, really wild stuff. And he also told me that serial killers have all kinds of supernatural abilities that they get because of collecting the spiritual tax from their victims. Yeah.
Wow,
So,
it's I'm definitely going to read that book. You convinced me.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. But the book is actually about the investigators that have these abilities, and there are so many of them. And so I do my presentation on para-investigators and who they are, who they have been, and all the people they have helped. And one of them, for instance, is this individual who was a security guard, because they can be police officers, security guards, they could be anything, anyone that's just trying to help people. And one of them is Richard Jewell, who was an individual that was able, in the United States, he was in Atlanta, Georgia, he was able to come across a giant package that was a hiking bag that was left in the middle of a road, in the middle of an Olympic party, a festival, that there were thousands of people dancing around this bag. And he used his abilities to decipher that in that bag was a bomb, that there was a bomb. And he never touched it, because we have all this on camera. He never touched it, he never went near it. He just set up a police barrier around this thing. And he was a security guard for the park. That's based for the Olympics at that point. That's all he was. But he responded as the greatest investigator ever. He put a barrier around this hiking bag. He told people, get out of the area. He said, and people weren't listening to him. And there were families with little kids. And he said to them, get out of the area. He started screaming at the top of his lungs. And he started waving his arms. And he finally screamed at people, get out of this area. This could be a bomb. This could be a bomb. Get out of here. And they finally started listening to him. They all left the area, and the thing blew up. And it killed one person. But if he hadn't done what he did, it would have killed 100 people, including a lot of little kids. And he was a great hero. Unfortunately, the people, the FBI agents who were listening to those videos of him screaming and waving his arms and yelling at people, they reached the same conclusion that I did, which is that he knew it was a bomb. He absolutely did know it was a bomb. But their conclusion was the only way he could know it was a bomb is because he planted the bomb. He made the bomb. I knew that the reason he knew was because he had a paranormal ability. He did remote viewing. He did some kind of vision. He maybe had a vision, but that he saw the bomb in there supernaturally. That was my conclusion. But they did not share my conclusion, so they ended up ruining his life and telling the media that he was probably the bomber, and it completely destroyed his life, and it was a terrible, terrible thing. 88 days later, they finally admitted that he was not the bomber, and somebody else stepped forward. Eric Robert Rudolph stepped forward and said he made the bomb, that it was his bomb, and so Richard Jewell was exonerated finally. Then it was recognized finally that he was a great hero who saved a lot of people's lives. It's just that people didn't understand the way that he did it. That was the problem. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's a great story. Well, the second book is The Extra Dimensions, the one that I read and that I just mentioned. Do I have an accurate perception of what the book is about?
Yeah, that's basically it's the entire narration, and it's the investigative file of how all the evidence that shows that these alien visitors, that they are not physical, that they are extra dimensional, they are coming here from other dimensions, that it looks like the real truth of our reality is that the Earth is basically primarily a gateway, and secondly, it's a planet. It's a planet second, but primarily it is a gateway. It is a gateway to other universes, other dimensions, other realities, and apparently Earth is like the planet of 1,000 galaxies, because we have things coming in and out of here all the time. And apparently they're not coming from outer space. They're not, because if they were, they would have just arrived here physically by now, and we'd be seeing them everywhere. And that's not the case. And the case is because these are things that are coming here from other dimensions, and they are extra dimensional. That's why the book is titled Extra Dimensionals, and it's the explanation of why this is the reality that we're living in. And since I wrote the book, it was a bestseller on Amazon, and I've seen that the ideas of this book have been spreading throughout the community and throughout a lot of places where they are now coming to the same ideas that the Extra Dimensionals has been showing them for years now.
Great. That's great. That's great. So, and the third book is the Clear Hearers, right? So I have here that it's about people that hear voices of authority or voices that can help them.
Yeah, they don't hear them; they perceive
Okay.
voices, and there's a big difference there, because these they perceive a clear voice of authority that comes to them, helps them, uplifts them, sometimes can even save their lives. And it's something that has been it's just has a new name, but it's been something in our culture since Joan of Arc. Since Joan of Arc started perceiving the voices of the angels. Sometimes she said it was the voice of Mother Mary that told her what she needed to do to save France, and she did do those things, and it was tremendous. But that goes back even further to Socrates. Socrates had his own great voice of authority. He used to call it a daemon, and he would come to him and give him advice and tell him when he was about to make a mistake, and give him advice on what he had to do and things like that. And so Clear Hearers, it's the old clairaudience.
Okay.
It's an investigation into what clairaudience really is, what clear hearing really is, where it's coming from, and why it's so important for us to learn to listen for it, to try to perceive this great voice of authority that's always trying to help us.
Okay, great. And well, you spend more. You said already you spent more than 20 years working for the FBI. You're called the X-Men because of the X-Files, the series.
Yes, I had a great affinity for the X-Files in the 90s. It was a great show on television, and I had a very a great affinity and affection for that show. And so as a result, they started calling me the X-Man for that.
And what's well, I have actually two questions. The first one, from your books, the story of your books, are they based on your FBI experience?
Some of them are, yeah. Some of them are. Some of them are based on FBI experiences of other FBI agents and police officers and security officers, people that I have known and collected stories from over the years, over many, many years, yeah.
Okay. And the second question is, how true is X-Files? Can we call you the Mulder of real life?
Yeah. There a lot of X-Files were true. Some of them were based on cases that I was connected to, and others as well. And a lot of it, in a lot of cases, though, I think they actually made the cases less interesting than they would have been if they had just told them exactly the way they happened.
Okay, that poetic license. Or
Yeah, exactly.
All right. I have here. We're getting to the end of our conversation, but I still have a couple of things to run through you. The first one, I separate here 3 episodes from the X-Files just for you to comment if it's something true or not. So I got the first season that I think it's the probably the most I don't know, convincing or close to the truth. I don't know. You tell me.
It's good.
So I have episode 8 for the first season here. It's an investigation of bizarre deaths of a scientific team in the Arctic. So is there something you can say about that? Not just about the Arctic, but Antarctica as well.
Yeah, Antarctica, all of that stuff is absolutely. I think all of that stuff is not only is it true, but the actual truth is much stranger than we could ever imagine. There are things going on at Antarctica that are beyond any understanding, and a lot of it, and most of it, is going on under the ground, so that the satellites can't pick it up, and it's crazy stuff. I mean, we have the pyramids that have been exposed out there, these giant pyramids bigger than the pyramids of Giza that have been exposed. The giant stairs, there's giant stairs that have been exposed that lead down into, that are larger than the Capitol building steps. It's a tremendous thing. And so there's all kinds of things that are being exposed at Antarctica, and they have clamped down on travel to there. And the nations, only the major nations are out there with a military, a small military and scientific crew that are out there in the southern part of Antarctica, that one peninsula where everything is happening. And so there's a lot of strange things. And I would also look for Putin and the Prime Minister of Russia, and also for Donald Trump to visit Antarctica this year. I think it's going to be happening.
Okay, so official visit, we're going to see that on CNN or Fox News, I don't know.
Official visits.
Okay.
And once that happens, it's going to be crazy, because they're going to have to reveal something somewhere.
All right, that's great news. So the second episode is episode 17. So Mulder and Scully, they're trying to find a ship of extraterrestrial ship before the government can destroy it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that one doesn't really have a basis in anything that actually happened, because the government wouldn't try to destroy those ships.
Maybe hide it.
They try to recover them. They try to recover them, get them back, and do the analysis, and derive whatever they can out of those materials, like what happened, like whatever they recovered at Roswell, and whatever they recovered at Virginia. They recover these things, they try to get them, and they try to get whatever benefit they can from those materials. So that's what I see happening.
Okay.
Much more often.
Okay. One interesting thing about Virginia, what they say, the investigators here in Brazil, here, not here, there, I'm in Toronto, but they say that the American government, or secret government, or I don't know, they were there really quick. And the deal that they made with the Brazilian government is that they recovered the ship, and they let the Brazilian government keep a body, one of the bodies from the ET, to be examined. I'm not sure. That's what they say.
Wow, I can see that.
Yeah, it looks pretty true, right? Yeah. The third episode, the last one, it's episode 24. It's a government conspiracy they are trying to find a killer with superpowers. So I think it's just what you wrote a whole book over it, right?
Exactly. A lot of these, there's a lot of these people, killers, serial killers, people who are very dangerous, and this happens. This happens in real life. You get these criminals who have these supernormal abilities, and I can tell you from my own personal experience, I've come across a few of these types of individuals, and we end up sending them to something called Supermax. Supermax is a super prison for super villains, basically.
Okay.
And so we end up, and you're only supposed to, we have one in Colorado, and it is it's like the most horrible castle you could ever imagine. It's, once you go to Supermax, you're not allowed human contact with any human beings for the rest of your life. And it's the only place that they can put these criminals who have special abilities. And some of them do. I dealt with one, for instance, that had, I don't know how to say, he had super strength. I mean, he had like super strength. He had the ability to break handcuffs. He had the ability to shatter shields when these teams would come in on him with these shields. He would shatter shields. He would do extraordinary things. He could hold himself up in a ceiling for hours. He could hold himself just with the strength of his arms.
Okay.
Hiding in a ceiling, waiting for somebody. I mean, the things that he could do was incredible. Anyway, he finally we were able to send him to Supermax, which is it's a great achievement. It's a big achievement because there's not much room at Supermax, and there have been others too that I have known that we end up finally getting them to Supermax, where they'll never be able to bother anyone ever again. So that's something out of real life.
Wow, and that's the first time I'm hearing it. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. We're really seeing, as time goes by, I'm thinking I'm seeing more of science fiction movies that are not that science fiction.
Exactly. The truth is stranger than we can imagine.
Yeah. It's much more entertaining, if I may say that, than a movie. Wow. Well, my last question to you, John, it's why and how did you decide to openly talk about it after you left the FBI? So why you're coming out with it, and hasn't it caused you any trouble, or probably yes, right?
Not really. I mean, it's not something that the FBI doesn't really care about things that are in the paranormal. It's not something that they consider real, so they don't really care at all.
Okay.
But the reason that I decided to actually come into this area and to talk about these things is because I looked around and I tried to see, where is there more deception going on from official sources than any other area I've ever seen. And I looked at politics, economics, I looked at all the different areas. And then when I saw the paranormal, I just saw, or anything that was supernatural, exopolitical, I just saw more deception in these areas, mostly coming from scientific world, than anything else I've ever seen. And I thought, this is where they need an investigator more than anywhere else I've ever seen. An investigator that can actually come in, investigate, and find out the truth behind things that people are lied to about all the time. And that's what made me decide that my particular set of skills was needed the most in this area.
great. And I can't agree with you more. It's so much deception. It's, oh my God. Well, thank you, John. Thank you so much for the work you do, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's such a pleasure. I hope it's the first one of many.
Yes, Fabio. Thank you so much.
There's so much to talk about.
Awesome stuff, man. Thank you so much. It was my privilege, my honor.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, John Desouza. Thank you again, John, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.